Hi, I'm Tom Doyle, Associate Professor of Justice and Interim Director of the Fox Rothschild Center for Law and Society here at Community College of Philadelphia. Welcome to our Perspective series on CCP TV, the educational channel of Community College of Philadelphia. In this episode, Adjunct Professor David Travaskis interviews Keith Bailey, James William, and Talia Santiago. Keith Bailey is the Physicians for Social Responsibility Youth Court Coordinator. James Williams is the principal, Kensington Health Sciences Academy, and Talia Santiago is a high school junior. They're discussing the youth court program, an innovative alternative to zero-tolerance discipline, now in its second year at the school. Please enjoy what I'm sure you will find to be a very interesting and informative conversation.
Welcome to the Fox Rothschild Center for Law and Society's Perspective series on CCP TV, the educational channel of the Community College of Philadelphia. I'm David Travaskis, Adjunct Professor in the Paralegal Studies program. Today it is my pleasure to introduce a panel of distinguished guests. Immediately next to me is Talia Santiago. Talia is a junior at Kensington Health Academy here in Philadelphia. It's the Kensington Health Sciences Academy, isn't that?
Yes.
Talia, you make sure I say that right from now on.
Okay.
Next to her is her principal, James Williams. And next to James is Keith Bailey, who works for Physicians for Social Responsibility here in Philadelphia. This panel has been put together to talk about a topic that you, Talia, were testifying about before City Council this past summer, something called youth courts.
Yes.
And
that's
can you
correct.
tell us a little bit about what youth courts is?
Well, youth courts is when students get to decide a better punishment for another student who violated the school rules, better than to get suspended or to get kicked out.
So students are actually deciding what's happening to kids who've broken the rules.
Yes.
Now, Principal Williams, that sounds like something a principal's supposed to do.
Indeed.
So how is it that a principal is letting students make those kind of decisions?
Well, they need to be a part of that process. You're talking about buy-in from students, and the more of a voice that they have that's constructive and that's meaningful, the more opportunities for them to grow and to develop that sense of, in terms of moving forward collectively, that they're a part of that process.
That's interesting. Now, Keith, you're the outside expert they've brought in to set up the youth courts. Do you want to give us a little bit more of an overview of what youth courts are in the big picture and how it plays into school before we turn back to Talia to find out a little bit more about how it's working at Kensington?
Sure. Well, let me start off by saying that youth courts are not a new phenomenon or not a new program model. Youth courts have been around in the United States dating back to the early 1970s, where they were developed initially in Texas and Alaska, and there is some debate about where the first youth court was started. There are two distinct models. We have a community-based model when you look at the big picture nationally, which is about 70% of youth courts across the United States are the community-based model, where they're dealing with first-time juvenile offenders who are committing summary offenses, misdemeanors, and as an alternative to the traditional juvenile justice system are being referred through a variety of different sources to go before a court of their peers, have their case heard, and have a disposition developed. The other model is the school-based model, which is what we have here in Philadelphia, where school-based youth courts are dealing with disciplinary offenses within the school setting. As of 2010, I know there are over 1,500 youth courts nationally, but to talk a little bit about the school-based model in particular, which is what we're going to focus on today, I believe, we're looking at students who violate a code of conduct in the school district of Philadelphia, typically what we would refer to as a level 1 violation. So those minor school offenses such as cutting class, truancy at the early stages, disrespecting a teacher or staff person or other student. If they, one, agree to go through the process, because youth courts here in Philadelphia are a voluntary process, and then two, and this is key, is that they admit to the offense. The way that youth courts work here in Philadelphia is they're strictly as a sentencing court as opposed to a fact-finding court. they're eligible to be referred to a youth court based in their school, have their case heard by their peers, go through a trial process, and a peer jury determines the appropriate or suitable punishment for them.
Okay, and Principal Williams, I know the school district is moving away from that level 1, level 2, level 3 discipline system, but you're using this as an alternative means of discipline in keeping with what the new policies for discipline are in the district.
Yes, and also it's just a form of engagement for us. I mean, if you ask any kid who has recently dropped out of school, why did they drop out? And they will tell you, most will say they were bored. And really, I don't believe that's truly the essence of what took place there. I think they perceive that, but as I view it, it's more of a lack of engagement, a lack of a connection with the school. And because of that, we lose students. And what I want to do and what the school district sees a need, we've got to approach student engagement in a different way. And this is an excellent opportunity. Now, you should see kids who are normally not engaged in school, just the way that they gravitate towards student court. I mean, it is a meaningful tool that we utilize to increase engagement. And the more we do that, in whatever avenue we utilize, I mean, historically we've used sports and various other avenues, but this is an additional means by which we can engage students in school, where they can identify with schools and say, hey, I will be in school because I'm going to make sure I'm in my youth court class, because it's just that meaningful to the kids when they connect on that level.
Now, Talia, are you in a class for youth court?
Last year I was.
Okay, and I did want to make sure that we get it clear for the audience. You aren't a student who went to youth court because you did something bad.
Oh, no.
No, you were a student so you started last year in a class.
Yes.
And so what was the class? Was it like a social studies class?
I think it was a government one.
A government class. And
Yes.
so in the class they were teaching you about the court system. And how did you learn about youth courts?
Well, I had transferred in October, and they had put me in that class. And at first, it was like, I was kind of nervous, because I was like, what am I going to do? I don't know nothing about this. And then they started teaching us about the amendments, and I really enjoyed it, because it was like, they let the students be the lawyer. They let the students do everything without, like, teachers or principals interfering.
Well, wait a minute. Let me step back on that. So you have a court where there are judges and lawyers, and there's a jury, and it's all students?
Every one of them is students.
Now, is this just like a mock court where you're just practicing, or are you handling real
No,
discipline
we're
matters?
really handling discipline matters in the school.
So a student comes in. Let's say I'm a student. I'm a bad student. I did something wrong. Principal Williams, maybe you can help us there. If I've done something wrong, do you sort of give me a choice, get suspended or go to youth court? Is that how it works?
Well, you know, one of the things that we do, kids are only afforded the opportunity to go to the youth court once.
So it's a first-time offense, okay.
Well, and actually maybe a repeat offender for the same type of, as Mr. Bailey alluded to, low-level offenses. And it's just an alternative approach to dealing with the discipline. Obviously, if it's a repeat offender who's constantly in front of the dean of students or myself, something different needs to happen. And we look at that as a viable option. And it is proven on so many levels to be incredibly successful, especially for some kids who, for whatever reason, were not able to reach. This is an incredible alternative.
So I'm a kid, I've done something wrong, I'm before you, and you say, hey, we're not reaching you. Would you like to go try youth court?
Well, normally what happened, my discipline team, my school police officer is in direct connection with the classroom teacher. And that's probably the only role that we as adults play in that whole process.
Wow. So the student now comes before you, your youth court, and what happens? Does the student make their case? What happens when the student gets there?
Well, we get the team of defense attorneys and prosecutors. We get the judges, and everybody else becomes a jury. So the defense team takes that one student out to a different classroom and speaks to that student about what happened, what was the problem, try to get all the information down. We tell the student to make sure they're telling us the truth, because if they're not, then we can't really help them. So they agree that they have committed that crime, and then they let us know the whole story, and then that's how we work on our case.
Okay, so they come back, the defense team defends the student, the prosecution basically says what the student did?
Yes.
Now, in your court, do they present witnesses?
Yes.
And the witnesses are questioned?
All of them.
Okay, and then the defendant takes the stand and talks to the youth court?
Yes.
And then what happens?
Well, after hearing all the facts of the case, the jury will leave out to go to another classroom to decide what was his or her punishment.
What are the kinds of punishments that you might give?
We give weekly reports, we give letters of apology, community service, restitution, things like that.
Within the school.
Yes.
Within the school. Aren't these the same kind of things you do with kids, Mr. Williams? I mean, isn't somebody going to say, why aren't you doing your work? You're making the kids do all the work.
One might choose to look at it that way, but no. But what we're actually doing, we're getting the buy-in. We're getting that student voice that is historic or traditionally not been heard, and now they're having a chance to truly communicate in a way that they've never been afforded the opportunity before, and it's meaningful.
Okay. Now, I understand that part of the sentence often is that the kid who has done the offense against the school, as part of their sentence, has to serve on the jury.
Yes.
Does that happen in your courts?
Yeah.
And how do they feel when, after you guys had just given them a sentence, they're sitting listening to other kids?
Well, students haven't really came back to me to tell me if they liked it or not. Some would just be like, oh, they just sat there just to do it so that they wouldn't get into any more trouble. But I see it as that is a really good opportunity, and I really love the team court.
So, David, let me jump in and talk about jury duty as a sentence option and why it's so valuable for students who have gone before the court. I believe there are a couple of benefits to that model or to that program. And anecdotally, I've seen, even this year, a number of students who have gone before the court as defendants, as part of their sentence option, been asked to come back and serve on the jury, and then after that asked about, can I come back again? I want to be a part of this program. And we can use that as a motivating tool in that we're asking them to then, in order to be in this program, you need to not be getting in trouble. You need to improve your academic performance. You need to improve your behavior. And some of our best youth court participants have started out as defendants in prior years. And I believe also, furthermore, looking at the youth court jury duty option, there are a couple of benefits. And when we talk about kids getting in trouble in school, oftentimes it's the same 10 kids that are in the hallway every day. And the more that students are associating with the youth court members who we look at as leaders in the school and positive peer role models, the more likely they are to adopt some of those behaviors and norms. And furthermore, when I'm sitting in judgment of other students, it's causing me to reflect a little bit about my own actions.
So that's an interesting thing. The idea of using peer pressure for a positive, as opposed to the way we always view it as a negative on peer pressure. Keith, you were alluding a little bit to the history before of youth courts, and you talked about a national history, which seems to date back into the 1950s. So youth courts have been around a long time. What's Philadelphia's experience with them?
Well, I mean, if you want to go way, way back, there have been models based around youth courts going back to Central High School with their honor courts in the 1940s and 50s. But looking at how youth court is designed and developed today, that program was piloted here in Philadelphia back in 1998, and I had the pleasure of working with developing some of the initial youth courts actually at Kensington High School at the time in 1998 through a collaboration between a number of both city and nonprofit organizations, including the R-Square Neighborhood Project, the Philadelphia Empowerment Zone, Communities in Schools, and Temple Law School, among some other partners as well, like the DA's office, U.S. Attorney's office. Kensington High School back in 1998 piloted the first high school-based youth court program in the city of Philadelphia. We recently, within that year, expanded that model to South Philadelphia High and West Philadelphia High, and at one point we had youth courts in 8 or 9 Philadelphia high schools, all built within the school district's law and public safety small learning community, which was a model that the district implemented at the time. One of the really neat things about bringing this model back in 2011 was having the opportunity to bring in former program participants who went to Kensington High School, who were in some of the desks that the students are in today, saying, I was in this program, I attended this school. Again, Kensington High School split into 4 smaller schools in the 2000s, but sharing some of their experiences coming from the same neighborhoods and background, and giving the students today an opportunity to see here are some things that I can accomplish coming from this neighborhood and coming from this school, and having that shared experience together.
That's a neat thing. So you actually have brought alums of the first youth courts back to meet with the current youth courts. How does that feel for you as a student when you see people who are from the same neighborhood that you're living in now, who are 10, 15 years older than you and doing well? Is that something that makes you aspire to achieve more, Talia? Or is that just old people and you don't really listen to them?
I mean, I think every advice an older person would be good to listen to because they're wiser, they're more experienced, and they've probably been through the same thing. So I think it's a really good thing to have.
Principal Williams, one of the things that we hear stressed all the time in education is the idea that we should be doing things that are data-driven, things that have, statistical proof behind them. We hear wonderful stories, and you have Talia here as a wonderful example of what's going on. But what's the big picture in terms of, do these youth courts work?
Not only do they work, and yes, we must be data-driven, and no child left behind. But look what No Child Left Behind has done for us. We have dropout rates of 50% or more in major urban settings. And to that point, it's more of the idea of engaging kids in school. We need to reframe the conversation to not focus on academic achievement, but if we could focus on student engagement, academic achievement will go up. It's a natural byproduct of that. Character will be developed if we can engage students. And youth court is an avenue by which we can do this, because if we don't, we're going to continue to go back and forth, and we're not moving, we're not progressing. So I certainly view it as an incredible opportunity to engage students. Yes, we're accountable, make no mistake about it. But what are you going to do differently, since what we've traditionally, and certainly in recent history, with failure rate the way that it is, academically speaking, we've got to restructure. There has to be a transitioning to something, or at least incorporating other avenues of engagement. And quite frankly, Teen Court does it well. I recently removed a kid from one of our academic programs. She just wasn't making the grade from our dental program. And it's probably the most academically challenging program we have at my school, and hence the name change. And restructuring her classes after pulling her out of that the program of studies, one of the electives we gave her was Teen Court. And she recently came back to me after being in Teen Court for only 2 weeks, because we're on semesters and the semester is going to shortly end. She asked if she could stay and be a part of the experience for the whole semester instead of just a small portion that she experienced. And what she's communicating is that I'm finding a niche, something that works for me. And her engagement, which was lacking in her other programs of study, has now taken on an entirely different look. And that's what I have to do. Yes, we need to be data-driven, but you have to realize who you're serving and what those needs are. And if we earnestly approach that, we need these type of opportunities that Teen Court will afford.
And Keith, speaking of opportunities, one of the things that I know that you have as part of your youth court program is a summer connection, where students in youth court get to have different kinds of opportunities. Can you talk about that? And
Sure.
How does that fit into the whole overall youth court program?
Before I get into that, I actually also want to address the data-driven component as well. I'm happy to say that PSR, Physicians for Social Responsibility, this year is partnering with Children's Hospital of Philadelphia to actually conduct some research and evaluation around the youth court model, with Kensington Health Sciences Academies being one of the schools that we're examining, to look specifically at data and look at youth court as a model, and does it improve academic performance for participants? Are they more connected to their school? So hopefully this summer we'll actually have some data to back up.
Some locally produced data.
Locally produced
Because I know
data.
there is national data which suggests that very, very strongly, that youth courts do work. Interestingly enough, Talia, they say that it works best for the students who do youth court as part of their classes or part of the program, but that it is still also effective even for the person who only gets to youth court as a defendant and goes through the process and only has that brief connection. But we see the real value of the connectiveness because the students in youth court have better academic success and things like that. I don't know if your grades have gone up since you've been in youth court, but our hope is it does for the data. But Keith, the rest of that, you were going to talk about the summer programming and those kind of
Sure.
things and how that fits in.
So the summer component, again, was a model when we initially developed the youth courts back in 1998, was a model that a component that I thought was integral to the development and serving also, one, as an incentive for participants, but two, as an opportunity to apply some of the skills that are developing as a youth court member. So PSR has received funding last summer from the Philadelphia Youth Network and their Work Ready program to engage youth court participants in a 6-week paid summer internship model, where we placed youth court participants into law-related internships over the summer, 20 hours a week, where they're having an opportunity to work in a professional office setting, for the most part in law-related placements, having an opportunity to, 1, earn a few dollars over the summer, 2, earn an academic credit, and then 3, develop some connections and mentoring relationships with professionals in the law and justice fields. So for example, Talia this past summer worked at the district attorney's office and had an opportunity to make some really strong connections, not only with District Attorney Seth Williams, but with some of his other attorneys and staff in that office, the Defenders
Well, wait a
Association
minute.
of
Let's
Philadelphia.
hear about that, Talia. So you were actually working with the district attorney.
Yes.
And so what did you do?
I mean, it was an amazing experience for me, and I was like so happy. I was like, thank you, Keith, thank you. But it was like, I got to work in the office. We were filing a lot of paper. We were helping them because they had so much backed up paperwork that they didn't even know like what to do with it or how long it was going to take them to get everything done. And it was me and 2 other students. We would actually stay like an hour, 2 hours after our time was already over.
So you volunteered some time in
Yes.
addition to what you got paid for.
Yes, because we weren't getting paid for those extra hours.
No wonder they want her back this summer. Yeah.
And I made a lot of strong connections with everyone in the office.
Well, what do you mean strong connections?
I don't know, it was just like a bond that I had with them, and the lawyers, we would talk because of this program, I became interested in being a lawyer. So when we used to talk to the lawyers, we would ask them how did they get interested in it. We would ask what schools did they attend to see if we would want to look into those same schools. And I recently had gotten a text message from one of the coworkers. She was wishing me happy holidays.
So
I felt
you
like,
still are hearing from
Yes.
them now, even though you haven't worked with them since the summer.
Exactly.
Oh, that's really neat. And I love the idea that they want you back, but if you're giving them extra hours, we need to make sure we get you paid for those hours. We'll work on that. The city, though, can use the volunteer gift of that. And would you have had a job last summer but for that experience, or did you have another job in addition to that?
No, that was my only job. That was my first job.
That was your first job, and you got it because you were in youth court.
Exactly.
So that's pretty neat. I think, Keith, if I'm correct, that we actually had some interns here for the Fox Rothschild Center here at
Yes, we
CCP.
did. Mm-hmm.
So, and you say we're going to have more of those students this summer.
Yeah, we received word last week that the program would be funded again for this upcoming summer. So,
Awesome.
already starting to reach out. And as Talia was talking kind of about those mentoring relationships, I always kind of share this story because I find it to be a powerful one. As I mentioned earlier, back in 1998 and 1999, we had a similar program in place. And that mentoring component, I can't stress enough how strong it is. One of my students at the time, today, 15 years later, still has a relationship with her supervisor at the Defenders Association, who now happens to be the commissioner of DHS. And every time I see the commissioner, she said, I just talked to Nina the other week, and things are going well. And that particular student used youth court as an avenue to really explore what her interests were career-wise, ended up coming here, I believe, to CCP, going through the paralegal program, and now works at a law firm downtown as a paralegal, and maintains to this day that mentoring relationship with her internship supervisor back from the summer of 1998.
That's an exciting story. That's what you want for your students.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, Keith, you were talking about some other partners besides the District Attorney and Community College of Philadelphia. Who are some of your other partners that you have?
I'm going to apologize in advance if I do miss anyone, but we also partner with the Defenders Association, Temple Law School, Kintalk, which contracts with the Philadelphia prison system, state representatives, Brandon Boyle and Kevin Boyle, the Salvation Army, Good Shepherd Mediation Services, and there might be, Impact Community Services, and there might be one or two other sites. But really, the idea behind it was to give students a wide range of opportunities based upon where some of their interests were, but also to demonstrate and show, when looking at the field of criminal justice or the field of law, how it really is widespread, and there are a variety of different types of careers that you can go into within that larger overarching field.
So in addition to all the positive benefits for the school and for the students, there's a career enhancement element to all of this.
Definitely. I mean, we look at the youth court model as developing marketable job skills for students that are also going to help them when they go into post-secondary education. And my expectation is that the majority of our students, if not all of our students, continue their education. But we're looking at developing critical thinking skills. We're looking at developing public speaking skills. And I always share this story from last year when we reinvigorated and reinvested the program at Kensington Health Sciences Academy. We'll start with a group of students who in the beginning of the year are afraid to get up and speak in front of their peers, who by the end of the year, when the principal is in seeing a case and they might be the judge, are shushing their principal and saying, "You need to sit down now, we're getting ready to start a hearing." Or in Talia's case, going in front of a packed city council chamber and testifying before hundreds of people and having absolutely no issues or problems getting up there and doing that. So those are skills that translate well to the youth court, but are going to carry them throughout their lives.
And your point, I guess, is that it doesn't matter whether they go into careers in law, it's that they're going on to do something.
Definitely, yes.
Which is there. As the principal, I'm very curious, how did you get to find out about youth court? How did you bring this in? Because as I understand it, there's really still only a few schools in Philadelphia that are doing youth court. Isn't that correct?
That is correct. Actually, I didn't find it. It found me. When you have endeavors of this nature that are so specific, normally they need a driving force. And normally that's a teacher who has a vested interest or just an interest in that particular area. In this case, we were fortunate to already have a relationship with Mr. Bailey. And he, from his prior experiences, obviously wanted to rekindle this at some given point, and the stars aligned, and we were able to kind of sit down. He shared his vision of what this could look like and what it could potentially become, and it just was an easy embrace for me and my school as we try to create options for students. One of the things I'm very good at is just stepping out of the way and letting those who can and those who will do what they do well. And Mr. Bailey has spearheaded that effort.
Well, that's wonderful, but there have to be costs to this. And so how does a principal figure out that this is important enough to find some funding to do? Because we hear all the time how tight things are in the school district. And although it's got a great name for the Kensington Health Sciences Academy, I think I got that right.
You got it right.
We're still talking about a Philadelphia public school. This is a school, part of our public school system. So how do you find the support to be able to make something like this happen?
You make good programs happen. That's where the chair that I sit in on a daily basis, it's too potentially valuable not to pursue. One of the things that our new superintendent is speaking of, and what he refers to as his action plan as we move forward for the future, he talks about creating our own luck. And I love that concept. And this is exactly what this is. We have an opportunity to serve our kids, to serve our school, to serve our community. You find a way to make that happen, both from a human resource place and also financially. And you just make it happen.
Well, are these youth courts that expensive?
They're not that expensive, but there's a cost associated with anything of value, if you will. And but it's a price that we don't mind paying.
Okay, and I know Councilman Jones, Curtis Jones in the city, is pushing these youth courts. He's the one who held the hearings that Talia testified at. He has had meetings since then. There's a resolution of City Council saying these things are going. But is this something you talk about with your other principals when you get together? Because I know as principals you occasionally will get together to talk about policies and other things. Is this something which is being talked about in other schools right now? Or is it really just still sort of a seeds around the city in some places like Kensington?
I would probably defer to the seeds. We're always as principals with our colleagues, what are you doing, what's working for you, and it comes up, but I think if you're not careful, it becomes another initiative that never takes root. And quite frankly, that may have been the case even with myself. However, I had a resource that I knew and knew what he was capable of. So with that kind of emphasis, it was able to take root in my school. I think with me sharing with other schools what I'm doing, I think it's viewed and looked at as, oh, okay, that's nice. But when you have a myriad of all kind of issues that you're contending with, and as you alluded to with some of the financial challenges that we face, another financial burden, if you will, is not what most of us are looking for.
So, and Keith, that actually goes to the role Physicians for Social Responsibility has in this. And I wanted to ask, because I know you're not a doctor, and I know you're not a lawyer, so you're doing youth court, which sounds like law, and you're working for a group of doctors. So how does this all fit? It makes some sense, I guess, that Physicians for Social Responsibility is at Kensington Health Sciences Academy. That makes some perfect sense. But how is it that you guys are working on youth court, which seems like pretty much something that lawyers should be doing? And
Sure.
Most of the programs you mentioned before involve a lot of lawyers.
And I get this a lot in terms of Physicians for Social Responsibility. A lot of times I'll be coming in to speak to an elementary school class around issues of bullying or violence, and then everyone will say, "Welcome, Dr. Bailey." And although as much as I'd like to claim that role and the salary that would go along with it, I'm neither a doctor nor an attorney. PSR is a national organization that was founded in 1961 in the city of Boston by a group of physicians and medical professionals around the issue of nuclear war. The Philadelphia chapter was established in 1981, and it was really medical school driven. However, the organization, which is a local 501c3, is staffed by non-medical professionals. And here in Philadelphia, we kind of refocused and reestablished our mission in the mid-1990s with the end of the Cold War to look at one of what the largest issue facing us here in our city of Philadelphia. And through a strategic planning process and really through engaging the community, it was the issue of interpersonal violence, and specifically a focus on youth. So for a long time, PSR's programs have looked at violence prevention and youth violence prevention. When I came to PSR in 2010, and David, you and I have actually worked with the organization dating back to the late 90s around gun violence prevention initiatives in North Philadelphia. But with my coming on board, I've worked with restorative justice programs for a long time and said this is a model that we need to be doing more of. And when we look at restorative justice, it's a natural fit with violence prevention because we're looking at harm that's done to the community and what needs to be done to repair that harm and who's impacted by that. So youth courts are a violence prevention initiative in that we look at statistics that are out there and we look at students who are being suspended from school, students who are dropping out of school are more likely to end up engaging in criminal and delinquent behavior, end up in situations where violence is taking place. So it fits very well with the model that we have as a violence prevention organization. That's not all the work that we do, but that is one major area of the work that we do. And if I could, I wanted to speak for a quick second about why Kensington Health Sciences Academy was such a good fit, and I appreciate all the kind words from Principal Williams. But he had a valuable resource already in place at his school, which really speaks to why it was an excellent model, excellent school to look at kind of getting that program back up and running. And that was a social studies teacher who was already in place at that school, who I had the pleasure of working with dating back to 1999, who at Kensington, when it was one larger comprehensive high school, both served as a disciplinarian but also served as a social studies teacher working with the youth court in its original incarnation. So there was some institutional experience already in place. There was a smaller learning curve, and it was an easy, natural transition to get that program back up and running at that particular school. So just to highlight that fact as well as the disciplinarian at the school, who, when we originally had the youth court, would refer a lot of students in his role as a classroom teacher. So there was, again, some experience and familiarity with the model, which kind of shortens the learning curve for a school, and there's some credibility and some buy-in already because they've seen it work, they know it's effective, and there's not that skepticism as, we're going to turn this over to our high school kids to handle. How's that going to work? They've seen it in action and see it be successful.
Now, Talia, you mentioned that you took the class last year, so you were a sophomore taking the class.
Yes.
Now, you're a junior. Do you have any connection to youth court now, other than talking it up?
Well, yes, I have to help the new students in training.
Oh, so you actually do some training of the new students, and so what's that like?
It's fun. It's like you always feel like you're in need, like somebody needs you. You need to help them to succeed in what they want to do.
And are the students this year as good as you guys were last year?
No.
But you'll work with them to make them better?
Yeah.
I like that. Prince Williams, when Keith was talking about those stars really were aligning to make it work at Kensington, what I want to ask you is, when you're thinking about moving forward, and obviously we know that the Health Academy at Kensington is going to continue. It's not a school that's on the closure list. It's something that's moving forward. The new superintendent has his plans. How do you see youth court fitting into those plans moving forward? And do you have any plans for trying to expand it beyond just a single classroom activity? Or just what are your future plans for youth court?
I'll answer that question. Let me give you a little bit of background with the student population that we serve. And then we can move forward from there, because I think it's vital to understand what ilk of students that we're speaking of. My school is located in the second poorest congressional district in the United States. 95% of my kids are on free and reduced lunches. And for some of those kids, that's probably their only warm and balanced meal of the day. And they come with a whole host of challenges. I mean, one of the zip codes for the feeder pattern of my school, where we're located, is #1 in the nation for reported cases of sexual child abuse. And I say that to say that when poverty is a part of the equation of a student population, the challenges are only magnified and exponentially challenging. And to try to get kids to articulate what they're feeling, what they're going through, to have empathy for the individual seated next to them, it's just unnatural with the environment that many of my kids face. So when you talk about moving forward with a program that truly challenges kids to think about, to step outside of themselves and their own circumstances, to think that they can give meaningful input to another kid, despite all the codes that they're taught out there in the streets and elsewhere in the neighborhood, that they can come and actually communicate about where other kids are and what they need to do to move forward. I'm challenged to say, how could you not include that in my plans to grow my school? And student court is definitely, when you talk about restorative practices, you have to, if we're going to strive to complete our kids, holistically approach their needs. So I don't know where the resources are going to come from. I defer that to Mr. Bailey. We'll fill out grants and we'll seek those funding sources together. I know my budget is incredibly limited, but moving forward, it must be a part of the plan, because it can do something for kids that my other programs of studies cannot. And I cannot eliminate that. It's challenging because we are so small to account for a program that's so isolated, that's only an elective course. But it's so needed. And I don't know what specifically the future will hold for that program, but it's a part of what my school will ultimately become.
And as a rising senior next year, you'll make sure he lives up to that, right, Talia?
Yes.
Keith, is Kensington the only school you're working with?
No, PSR works with a number of schools. This year we actually piloted for the first time, and I use the term youth court as opposed to teen court specifically because we're moving in some new directions this year. We piloted a youth court with a 5th grade class at a K-8 charter school in West Philadelphia, and it was my first time working with such a young population in this particular model, and I was skeptical at first, but I've become impressed with how well our younger students take to this model, buy in, and actually deliver. We also work with a charter school down in Center City, Arise Academy, which serves kids when Principal Williams was talking about who are really coming in with a lot of challenges and barriers. Arise is a charter school that's serving kids specifically under DHS care, so the Department of Human Services. So these are young people who might be living in foster care or group homes, or have an open or past case with DHS and have a lot of challenges that they're overcoming. And when we look at alternatives to in or out of school suspension and keeping kids in school and engaged, with that population, it's a must that we do that. We're continuing to expand the model to other schools, both here in Philadelphia and in the region, and I'm hopeful that we'll, either by the end of this school year or even moving into next year, have youth court back up and running in a number of different schools. The U.S. Attorney's Office has been an integral partner with developing and reinvigorating youth courts around the city. And if I could speak for a second when we talk about resources and funding, I think it's a testament to how kids are engaged in this program. Talia, for example, last year worked over her spring break in partnership with me on grant proposals. So when kids are typically at home watching TV, she's writing grant letters of support and staying after school and meeting with potential funders. And through Talia's efforts, we were able to secure some funding from the Philadelphia Foundation for this program year through their Youth-adelphia program, which is helping to support some of the work that we're continuing to do at Kensington this year.
That's pretty good. Do they give you a cut of what you bring in?
No.
No.
It's not needed. I feel like this program can really help a lot of the students because I've seen it with my own eyes. Like, it can build your self-esteem so much because it did it for me. Just to hear a student that I defended because he got in trouble, he could have got kicked off of, I believe it was like basketball or football. And he came to me when the class was over and was like, if it wasn't for you, I would have been kicked off the team. Like, I thank you for that. Like, I felt like I helped him accomplish something. I helped him to realize that what he was doing was wrong. And he stopped hanging around a lot of the students that got him in trouble because, you know, the sport he was playing in his school was very important to him because he was a senior at the time. So it's like, if I can do that, then anybody else can do it if they really set their mind to it.
Okay, but we've got to ask you this question, and I'm sure people watching this will think it. You're one of those good shoe students, right? You were a great kid. You've never had any trouble. You always get all A's, things like that, right?
No.
No?
I mean, I've gotten into some trouble. It's nothing major. And I haven't always gotten straight A's. I've never gotten straight A's. But I do try to focus into school and not to feed into a lot of the immaturity that goes on around me.
But are you saying basically that the youth court is made up of regular kids? It's not all just like the top students?
Yes.
And
there's
it works.
troublemakers and there's the goody-goody two-shoes.
So,
and the troublemakers do, like, after a while they start realizing that it's time to grow up because this is reality.
and I've got to tell you, I was one of those goody-goody two-shoe students. There's actually a lot you can learn from some of those troublemakers that can help you realize the world's a bigger place.
Yeah.
Principal Williams, you must love it when you hear a student like Talia talk about things that she's learned at your school. Do you see that with any of the other students? Do they share that information with you?
Well, as I shared with you, the one young lady who, for next semester, I must be in that class.
Now, is she going to get in that class?
She will definitely get in that class.
Oh, I like that.
And without a doubt. And That's just that figuring out process. And when you talk about are the good kids or the better students selected for this program, it's an elective. And quite frankly, it's a matter of what the schedule dictates. So it's not any kind of selectivity there, and which speaks to its effectiveness overall. And one of my concerns when we sat down, I thought, wow, will there be any form of retribution for some kid who's in opposition to a fellow student? And that was really my biggest concern. You know, would someone see someone later as a result of the decisions that were rendered? And that's not even an issue. And it's accepted. And it's embraced in a way that and you're talking about kids who have a no snitch mentality, who are buying into a system or a protocol that, quite frankly, is counter to what they hear on a daily basis. And the kids love it. It's amazing the effectiveness that we've experienced with our students, and to me, just their personal growth. And that's why, you know, Dave, as you ask about, you know, what does the future hold? I'm not really sure, but I know what will be a part of that future.
That's neat. It was actually a question I wanted to ask about whether you're worried about seeing any of these kids later in the hallway, because you give a sentence to them and they have to do things. And has anybody ever come up to you afterwards and said you were too hard on them or anything like that?
No, I mean, I was usually always the person who defended the
So
student.
you were a defense lawyer, so
Yeah.
they liked you.
Yeah, they loved me because they was like, you know, thanks a lot. Like, Dave always came back to me to say thanks. And when a friend of theirs would want to go in the wrong direction, they would try to pull them in the right direction because they were like, you don't want to go in there, but if you want to do it, then go ahead, but I'm not going with you.
So that's neat. Now, Keith, you have a wide experience with this. Is retaliation something we have to worry about, or are there ways the youth court's structured to prevent
Right. And that's a frequent concern that schools have when we talk initially about, you know, developing this model. In all the years that I've either developed or run directly or worked with youth courts, I've never seen it. And I believe there are a couple of reasons why that's the case. The first is that with youth court, it's a voluntary process. So students are agreeing to go through this as an alternative. And we let students know from the beginning that they can change their mind at any time. You know, we've had students who were on the literally on the stand during a trial say, I don't want to do this. And we said, all right, we'll stop it right here. We'll refer it back. The second is that it's a sentencing court. So it's not students saying, you did this, and the defendant feels like, well, I really didn't do it, and they're punishing me for something I didn't do. They're admitting responsibility for their actions prior. And third, again, and this is really important, is that we've kind of followed that restorative justice model. So we're looking at repairing harm that's been caused, but we're also looking at addressing some root causes of behavior as opposed to just addressing an individual action. So students who are going before the court, you know, they're asking about their grades and what are your grades like, and part of that sentence option might be, we want you to go to tutoring so that you can improve your grades. We'll be here to help you through that when needed. Principal Williams and I actually, when talking about are we just picking the cream of the crop, you know, brought to mind a conversation that we just had yesterday with one of our students who's in the youth court, who I would not refer to as a goody two-shoes student by any stretch of the imagination, but looking at youth court as a tool to engage kids. And I don't know if you want to talk anything about the conversation we had with our one student yesterday, but we have a student who was placed in the program because he needed that credit, who for the first couple of weeks was not doing any work, but now has started to buy in. You know, asked me on Tuesday, you know, Mister, can I be on the jury today? Yesterday, Mister, what can I do today? I said, why don't you be the jury foreperson? You can get up and read that sentence. And now is asking about being an attorney. And this was a kid who, in the beginning of the year, was one of those kids, when I talked earlier about 10 kids that we'd see in the hallway all the time. This might be the first class that catches his attention and gets him engaged, and then we then use that as a vehicle to get him engaged in some of his other classes and really start to change and improve behavior and academic performance. And it's something that I'm not just seeing this year, I've seen it over the years as well. You know, I've worked in schools where youth court might be the only class that a kid comes to attend. And we then say, all right, you're doing good in here, now let's take it and get that throughout the rest of your rostered classes, so that you're serving as that example and telling the kids, like, you can't be getting in trouble because you're going to be prosecuting someone next period. You can't be doing the same exact thing that you're then putting them on trial for.
So now, Talia, I've got a tough question for you. If you were to do something wrong and be in front of Principal Williams, and he gave you the choice of being suspended or going to youth court, would you go to youth court?
Of course.
And why? Why do you think?
Well, I feel as though students can really talk to students more because they feel like the students will understand better than an adult would. And to me, school is very important, so I wouldn't want to be suspended at all.
Okay. It's interesting, Principal Williams, when I read about youth court, one of the things I see a lot is the advocates for youth court talking about this as a way to break what we call the school to prison pipeline.
Sure.
The idea that we need to figure out more and more ways to keep kids in school. What are your discipline options if a kid doesn't go to youth court?
Well, they would follow the protocol that's in the student handbook, of course, and that's normally administered and followed through by our dean of students and that whole track, and that, which is fine. I mean, it's part of the process. However, if we have another vehicle, and as Mr. Bailey alluded to, those repeat offenders, and I, as the lead administrator in the building, I'm asking myself, what can I do differently? What does this kid need? You know, and that's a question that we don't ask enough, because it's got to be personalized. I mean, because each kid is so different. You know, my moral authority works for many kids, but some kids will tell me where I can go as a result of my moral authority. And what are you going to do with that kid? Just discard him or her? They deserve an opportunity to have their needs met. And youth court does that. Student court is just awesome. I mean, it's just, and it's not a panacea. It's not perfect, but at the same time, a word that I love to use in my building is the word option. And I want kids to have options, and I want to present those options in every arena, if at all humanly possible. And discipline should not be excluded from that conversation.
That's neat. Keith, what is the message for the people who are watching our show who might be interested in trying to get a youth court into the school where their kids go, or the school where they maybe work as a teacher or volunteer? How could they find out information about youth court?
Sure. Well, there are a number of methods. I would always recommend reaching directly out to me. I can meet with them and work with them.
And they can contact you through Physicians for Social Responsibility, which has a website and is easily available.
Yes, psrphila.org is our website. All of my contact information is on there. And let's get a conversation started, see if it's a program that they might be interested in, and how it might fit within their school.
Okay. Principal Williams, for you, moving forward, are there things that people watching this show could do to help you? Are there kinds of things that you're looking at to the community? I know Keith's making all these partnership connections for you, but is there some kind of support that people can just do? I know Councilman Jones is pushing this. He has his resolution. Is it something they can just talk to their council people about?
Well,
what's the way that we can help support a youth court in a school like yours?
I think that's great. I think it's so much of this is about attitude, and I think if we collectively as a community come together around these different avenues of interacting with our students, the whole will be served. And I think with the councilman's efforts but our individual efforts as a community, I mean, I can see Mr. Bailey putting together a fundraiser to help support these efforts, and he's brought other schools to my school in order to view our program, and I love that collaborative working. But yet those things.
Well, actually, and I want to interrupt for just a moment there. I actually visited the youth court at your school, and I think there was a parade of people. There were politicians there. There were, and I don't know if that happened all the time when you were in youth court, Talia, but it seems like a lot of people were there. I thought I'd be walking into a classroom and I'd be the only adult in the room besides the teacher, and it looked like there were more people watching than people participating. How do you pull that off, and who are all those partners, and what are they doing for you?
Well, they weren't all partners; they were visitors, if you will, and
Potential partners, I guess.
Absolutely, potential partners. And then those were through Mr. Bailey's effort, as he is about in his many hats that he wears in the community. And I think if you're interested in starting something like this at your school, or becoming actively involved in your neighborhood with the same type of program, I mean, my school is always open that you can come and visit. And I think if we're willing to, if there's those of us out there who have resources available, that is always welcomed. And so I think it's us collectively doing what we can, and whatever arena works for us. But
I do think that's a wonderful offer you make. So if somebody wanted to come see, they could contact you at, and I'll get this right, make sure I get it right. It's
Let's hear it.
Kensington Health Sciences Academy.
Perfect. Yeah.
And it's on the school district webpage, and I think if you just Google that, you'll get up a site to you. But they could contact you and actually come out and visit.
Oh, absolutely.
And see a youth court in action.
Get in contact with Mr. Bailey, or myself directly at the school, either or.
That's fantastic.
Don't call Talia though, because
no, Talia's got schoolwork. Keith, who are some of these partners that we should know about who are looking at youth courts or have supported other of your youth courts around the city?
Right. Well, I mentioned the U.S. Attorney's Office has been instrumental, and actually through that relationship that I've had with the U.S. Attorney's Office, actually developed a program at Kensington this year, working with the 9th grade around violence and crime-related issues.
Wonderful program.
The Philadelphia District Attorney's Office has been a longtime supporter of the program, dating back to '98, where we've had attorneys coming in from the DA's office and working with hands-on with the students in the youth court, Defenders Association, some other frequent visitors. Jefferson Hospital has a program called Jeff Stars, where we're bringing residents and med students into some of PSR's programs, and youth court has always been a program where we highlight. And at Kensington specifically, there's a neat partnership there, because we then bring those med students and residents into the health-related technologies program, into the dental program, and have an opportunity for the students in those programs to interact with some professionals in their field. Speaking of politicians, Councilwoman Sanchez has come out and observed a hearing and talked with the students.
And that's her district, right?
Which is her district. And actually, she initially invited Talia to come down and testify at a city council hearing on the school-to-prison pipeline. And then later in June, when Councilman Jones had his youth court hearing, I don't think I ever shared this with her, but Councilman Jones asked me specifically for Talia by name.
To come back.
To come back. I'd like to have Talia Santiago come back and testify. I saw her when she testified previously for Councilwoman Sanchez.
I need to tell you, I've never testified before City Council, and you've done it twice now before you finished your junior year in high school.
Temple Law School has been a longtime partner, and we're working to continue that partnership with both Temple and Penn law students to get them in and working with the schools, which again was a model that in the late 90s we had as well. And I mean, there are a ton of partners, so I'm probably not going to name them all today, or I'll probably miss a few.
But it's great to see, and the idea that it takes the village to make this work. Talia, we're going to give you the last word. If you were talking to other students, why should they want to be in a youth court?
Because the youth court can open many doors for them. It can help them to figure out what they want to do in life after high school, instead of just being a teen mom or a teen dad or a drug dealer or something. It gives them better options and better opportunities.
Well, thank you all very, very much. We're going to end now. That's all the time we have for today. And I do want to thank my guests, Talia Santiago, Principal James Williams, Physicians for Social Responsibilities, Keith Bailey. And I'm really excited that we could have you all talking about the program at Kensington Health Sciences Academy. Thank you who have been watching for joining us and for tuning in. You have been watching the Fox Rothschild Center for Law and Society's Perspective series on CCP TV, the educational channel of the Community College of Philadelphia. I'm David Travaskis, adjunct professor in the paralegal program. For more information, please contact us at the college. And we'll see you next time on CCP TV's Perspective series.